Okay, this is the first in a series of videos which are basically a beginner's guide to chip tuning or remapping. I'm going to use the EDC15 file that I've been using from the Passat TDI PD130. I've been using this all along in all of the videos so far, so if you've watched any of them you will be familiar with it. At the moment on the screen you can see the driver's wish map. There's the file with the driver's wish map, and there's the driver's wish map. Now, before I get too involved in this, let's just point out the obvious. The whole point of remapping or changing the tune of the engine for 99% of people is to produce more power. What they are looking for is more performance. Occasionally people are looking for more economy, but generally speaking people go down this road because they're looking for more performance. Now, in order to achieve more performance, there is virtually nothing you can do other than the obvious, which is put more fuel in the engine. So no matter what people say, at the end of the day, generally speaking, if you tune an engine to give you more performance, you will use more fuel, because the energy for the more performance has to come from somewhere, and it doesn't come from fresh air, it comes from the fuel. Now, having said that, occasionally people notice that having tuned an engine slightly for more performance, their economy is no worse. In fact, some people sometimes find it's even slightly better. Now, this is often misleading because it is very often the result of how you drive the changed car. In other words, you may well find that with a slight performance increase due to a remap, that you're not actually pressing the pedal down so hard to get the performance that you used to have on the old map, and you might find yourself throttling back on occasions just because you're happy with what you've got. And the end result of that is that occasionally people will notice that they've either got exactly the same fuel consumption as they had before, even though the map is giving a little bit extra performance, or it may have even improved the fuel consumption a fraction. But very often that's not a result of the remap as such, it's a result of the way they are choosing to drive given the remap. So obviously, if you've remapped and what you intend to do now is to use every ounce of performance that you've managed to wring out of the map, then your fuel consumption is going to be considerably higher. So I just want to make that point right at the beginning, that if we want more performance, we're going to have to use more fuel. It's as simple as that. Now, as a start to this, it's probably easier to jump from one map to another and show what's going on if I don't use WinOLS. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to exactly the same maps but displayed in Microsoft Excel. Now, this is an old version of Microsoft Excel, and that's deliberate because I've been using this since it came out in 2003, and I'm perfectly comfortable with using it, and I've carried on using it. So that's why you're looking at an old version. I've got newer versions, and I just don't like them, so that's why I'm still using this one. Okay, now here we go then. What we've got here is the same map we were just looking at in WinOLS. Here's the driver's wish. There's the driver's wish as it would have come straight out of the file in WinOLS. The only difference is that I've put the axes data here where it belongs in terms of our view of it, because when I first copied it across, the axis data was up here in a block. And so what I've done is I've moved it to the appropriate spot so that it looks a bit more like a map. And then here I've done exactly the same thing, but I've added the factors so that we can see it as it is in a map. So that's the file display, that's the map view. And I've done this on purpose because I want to be able to look at the fueling on the driver's wish nice and clearly. And then I've done the same. There's the file for the smoke map, there's it shown as a map, there's a comment on the actual fueling. I'll ignore this one for a moment and come back to it. And I've done the same again here. There's the torque map as it appears in the file. There's the torque map as it appears in a map. And again, there's the maximum fueling. And again here, boost map file, boost map as you would see it as a map. I'll ignore that one again. And here we are, single value boost limiter. If you've looked at the other videos, you'll know that that's 2620 for this file. And here's the boost limiting map. And I'm just again showing the maximum. Haven't worried here about whether it's a file view or a map view, because they're basically the same, because the only difference would have been a naught in front of each of these if we were looking at the file, because the file would have had 5 digits for each of these, whereas these have only got 4. But basically the numbers are the same. Don't need to worry about factors or offsets. Okay, right, I'll go back to the beginning because I want to make a simple point here, and then I will stop the video and move on into what I suppose you could call part 2. I'm trying to keep all of these videos at a manageable length so that you don't drop dead from sheer boredom watching them. Okay, here we go. Look, here we've got the driver's wish map for our PD130. And if we look at it, we can see that we've got a request here from the driver's pedal, from the accelerator pedal, of 70 milligrams per stroke of fuel. Now, for that engine, that's probably plenty of fuel to get quite a big increase in power from the engine should we inject 70. Now, do we? I mean, that's the obvious thing, isn't it? I mean, if we were injecting 70, would we get an increase? And if we're not injecting 70, what are we injecting? Now, in terms of making a remap, we might want to play with these figures, but we might not want to change them to make them any bigger. We might simply want to move them around a little bit. But anyway, I'm not going to worry about that at the moment. I'm going to come back to that at a later date. I just want to give people an overview at the moment of what we're talking about. So there's our 70 milligrams. Right, now let's go and look and see what the smoke map is doing. If we look at the smoke map, our maximum, which again I've highlighted in red, is 58 milligrams. So I might have been requesting 70 milligrams to inject, but I'm not getting it. The best I can manage is 58. And it's quite possible that much of the time, depending on how I'm driving, I won't even get 58, because obviously it depends where on the map I will be at any given time when I'm trying to accelerate through the gears. But I'm being told here that the maximum I'm going to get anyway is 58. Now again, ignoring this map here, if I jump forward to the torque map, I see something even stranger, which is that as far as the torque map is concerned, between about 1900 revs per minute and roughly 2500 revs per minute, the maximum injection quantity is going to be 52 milligrams per stroke. So that 52 milligrams per stroke is going to be fed into the duration maps. The duration maps are going to calculate a duration for the injectors to be open, and that's what I'm going to get, maximum 52. So if we work our way backwards to the beginning again, there we are, we're requesting 70. The smoke map is saying no, I'm going to limit that to 58, and the torque map is further going to limit it back to 52. Now, just before I stop this session, let's just run through and look at why. We can ask for 70 here, but when we get to here, the smoke map is saying, no, you can't have 70 because the available air, and this is the air column, remember, the available air for this fuel does not allow for 70. So this amount of air is good for, let's say, 58, 60 milligrams per stroke. It is not good for 70, so therefore this map does not allow for it. So you're being limited to 58 simply because this map doesn't allow enough air for 70. Now I'll come back to that because that's the whole point of this yellow chart. Now when we get to the torque map may well be getting a message or looking at the ECU figures and saying, yes, 58 is a possibility, but the torque map is now saying, no, 58 is not a possibility. I'm going to limit to 52. So at the peak power point, which is somewhere between 1900 and 2500, so this is our real peak point on one of these turbo diesels, which just goes to show that all this acceleration up here, or trying for more acceleration up here, is not a big difference on a diesel. This is where all the power is. We're being limited to 52, and in fact if we look, what happens is we get a slow increase in limitation, in other words or an increase in non-limitation, as it were. So as we go up here, these numbers are increasing, so we are allowing more and more fuel to be injected, and then it's gradually tailing away again and making less and less fuel available. And why are we doing that? Well, the designers have decided that if they allow this figure to continue, or if they allow this figure to go higher, you are going to damage the engine, damage the gearbox, break the clutch, that sort of thing. So in other words, this is all about longevity of the engine, because if they sell you a car and the engine breaks straight away, they're not going to be very popular. So this is all about longevity of the engine. Right, now that means that we can expect in our files to be able to go through them and say, well, okay, what's the maximum at the moment for the driver's wish? What's the maximum that the smoke map will allow? What's the maximum that the torque map will allow? And we will usually find that the driver's wish is the highest allowable, the smoke map is the second highest allowable, and the torque map is the third in the row, and that's usually the point at which there is some kind of stop to stop you damaging the engine, especially at different air pressures, although they don't all have an air pressure range like this, as you will have seen if you've looked at some of the other videos. Right, now at this point you know then that if you want to do some kind of tuning or remapping, whatever you want to call this, you will be considering changing the driver's wish, or you may not, because depending on what the driver's wish map has already got on it, you might not need changing. If you have changed the driver's wish map, you will then want to look at the next limitation, which is the smoke map. So you will probably want to change the smoke map. And if you want to change the smoke map and give yourself a bit more performance available there, you are almost certainly going to want to change the torque map to allow a little bit more power here. So if you don't change at least two of those, these last two, you obviously won't get the performance increase you think you're going to get, because they are the two that are really limiting what's happening in this particular ECU. Now there are other maps that I've put on here, but I'll come back to those in a moment, because I will take each of those in turn and explain why they need to be looked at in the way that they are looked at. So I'll stop there.